A monstrous secret, entombed in Burkina Faso's sands for decades, has been violently unearthed: human skulls, shattered chains, and a legacy of agony exposed by a merciless storm. One man's defiant stand threatens to detonate a global scandal, leaving France scrambling to bury the truth again. The sandstorm struck Oudalan suddenly. Strong winds swept fiercely across the northern region of Burkina Faso, covering homes, roads, and fields beneath thick layers of sand. Villagers huddled indoors, listening anxiously to the relentless roar of wind outside. Hours later, silence returned. Slowly, people stepped from their shelters, blinking into the glaring sunlight. They were stunned by what they saw. The familiar landscape had changed completely. A large, strange depression had formed, right at the village's outskirts. Cautiously approaching, they saw bones scattered clearly across the exposed earth: human skeletons, bleached white by decades beneath the sand. Nearby, fragments of rotting wood protruded awkwardly, alongside rusted metal chains. Then, something else caught their attention: a weathered stone slab, half buried and worn by years. They moved closer, carefully brushing away the sand, revealing faded words in French: Camp de Travail, 1932. No one spoke. They simply stared, absorbing the scene in stunned silence. Oudalan had just revealed a secret, a hidden place from another era, exposed by nothing more than wind, sand, and chance. Word of the discovery spread rapidly. News reached Ouagadougou swiftly, pulling the attention of President Ibrahim Traore. He listened carefully, his expression unreadable as officials described the bones, the rusted chains, and the stone slab bearing that haunting inscription: Camp de Travail, 1932. Without hesitation, Ibrahim traveled directly to Oudalan upon arrival. He walked silently toward the uncovered site, his steps measured and deliberate. The villagers watched, uncertain, as their president knelt slowly, gently picking up a fragment of bone from the sand. He held it carefully, turning it slowly between his fingers, feeling its brittle texture, imagining the life it once belonged to. Ibrahim said nothing. He didn't have to. The quiet intensity in his eyes conveyed more than any speech ever could. The gathered crowd remained still, watching their leader in his silence. They sensed empathy, dignity, and resolve. Ibrahim slowly rose, looking out over the stark remains exposed by chance. His silence wasn't empty, it carried a promise. Something would be done, not through anger or accusation, but with honor and respect. Ibrahim Traore stood ready, silently determined, and the people of Oudalan knew they were no longer alone. The day after returning from Oudalan, President Ibrahim Traore stood calmly before a room packed with journalists. Cameras clicked continuously, capturing every subtle movement. The tension was evident. Everyone waited, anticipating his response. Ibrahim spoke quietly, deliberately choosing each word. His voice, soft yet powerful, filled the silent room clearly. "What we uncovered yesterday in Oudalan was more than a collection of bones," he began, his eyes gently scanning the faces in front of him. The journalists watched intently, recording every word, sensing the sincerity in his voice. Ibrahim's quiet presence radiated strength without aggression, authority without dominance. He spoke slowly, clearly articulating a truth that many had chosen not to see. The villagers who had stood silently around the pit of bones now listened carefully through radios and screens across Burkina Faso. His message carried an undeniable gravity, reaching deep into the hearts of his people. There was no blame, no accusation in his tone, only a firm determination to acknowledge what had happened. He offered dignity back to those whose lives had been hidden beneath sand and silence. Ibrahim finished, allowing his words to linger in the hush that followed. Everyone understood he didn't need loud speeches to convey his resolve. Ibrahim's quiet words spoke louder than any outcry, affirming his people's worth and their shared past in a way that left no room for doubt. After the speech, Ibrahim quietly returned to his office. He sat alone for a moment, gazing thoughtfully at the horizon through his window. Memories flooded back, a childhood spent listening to his mother recount stories passed down through generations. Stories of hardship, resilience, and dignity. One story, in particular, resonated deeply within him, a conversation from many years ago. As a child, Ibrahim had asked his mother why certain elders in their village never spoke openly about their past. Her answer remained etched clearly in his memory. She had explained gently that some memories carried great pain, and that silence was how people protected their dignity when others tried to take it away. But Ibrahim also remembered the promise he had quietly made himself that very day. He promised that if he ever had the power, he'd honor those stories not through vengeance, but by giving voice to silence, restoring dignity to those whose lives had been erased, now, as president. Ibrahim saw clearly that moment had arrived. It wasn't about making accusations. It was about fulfilling a long-held promise, one that demanded action, honor, and respect. He stood up decisively. It was time to act. "We don't have to rebuild the past," he whispered firmly to himself. "We just have to acknowledge it." Ibrahim knew exactly what he needed to do next. Not out of anger, but out of loyalty to those whose stories had waited long enough. In the weeks following Ibrahim's quiet yet powerful promise, historians and researchers began arriving in Udalan. Experts carefully documented every detail, piecing together the past from scattered bones, rusted chains, and faded inscriptions. Soon, uncomfortable truths began to surface. Researchers confirmed what many had suspected: the place uncovered by the storm was never officially recorded in colonial archives. Camp de Traore, 1932, simply didn't exist on any known historical map. Yet, here it stood, an undeniable reality. Villagers gradually shared stories once told in hushed tones by their grandparents, stories of villagers disappearing silently at night, never returning home, lost without explanation. Memories previously hidden under layers of fear and silence now came forward boldly. For the older villagers, each uncovered bone represented a relative who vanished decades ago. For the younger ones, each discovery carried a powerful lesson. History is not always in books. Sometimes it lies buried, waiting patiently beneath the earth. As news of the forgotten camp spread, debates erupted in the media. Skeptics questioned the truth. Some openly doubted the validity of the findings, accusing Ibrahim of stirring controversy. Yet, despite the growing noise, Ibrahim remained resolute, quietly encouraging openness and transparency. He understood clearly that acknowledging this camp was not about blame, it was about truth. Facing history meant restoring dignity, healing wounds long ignored, and honoring those who had lived and suffered quietly, forgotten beneath the sands of Udalan. And so, Ibrahim made his next decision, one that would speak louder than words ever could. President Ibrahim's next decision was swift and clear. Without fanfare, he authorized the creation of a museum at the very location of the uncovered camp in Udalan. He called it simply the Museum of Sand and Blood. Construction began almost immediately, carefully preserving the original site exactly as the sandstorm had revealed it. Ibrahim didn't want polished displays or dramatic reconstructions. He wanted truth in its rawest, most honest form to speak for itself. Word spread quickly throughout Burkina Faso and beyond. Journalists, historians, and visitors from neighboring African countries began arriving, drawn by curiosity, skepticism, and hope. The museum, still modest and open air, offered visitors an unfiltered glimpse into a forgotten chapter of history. Rusted chains, scattered bones, and faded inscriptions became exhibits, quiet yet powerful reminders of a hidden truth. On the opening day, beneath a wide open sky, Ibrahim stood calmly before the gathered crowd. His speech was brief, yet each word resonated deeply. He spoke gently, but with unwavering conviction, making clear that this museum was not about accusation or revenge. It was a testament to dignity and remembrance. Ibrahim's voice carried clearly across the site. "We do not restore this place to point fingers. We preserve it so no one will again forget the cost of silence." As he stepped back, the silence that followed spoke volumes. Visitors lingered quietly among the scattered relics, sensing the weight and power of what Ibrahim had accomplished. He had turned tragedy into clarity, pain into remembrance, and silence into a voice stronger than any accusation. This museum wasn't simply a memorial, it was a statement. And from that moment forward, Ibrahim's quiet courage began inspiring change, far beyond Burkina Faso. News of the Museum of Sand and Blood quickly traveled beyond Burkina Faso's borders, igniting passionate debates worldwide. Journalists reached out to the French government, seeking their perspective on the uncovered history and Ibrahim's bold decision. France's response came swiftly, but not as many had hoped. The French Foreign Ministry issued a brief statement, carefully worded and emotionally detached. It emphasized the importance of reconciliation, yet subtly criticized Ibrahim's initiative, suggesting that revisiting such events risked reopening old wounds. Shortly after, a prominent French opposition senator publicly criticized Ibrahim's actions in harsh terms. President Traore's decision is reckless and irresponsible. He's deliberately weaponizing history to inflame tensions and damage our long-standing partnership. Burkina Faso deserves leadership focused on the future, not leaders obsessed with reopening scars. International headlines erupted immediately. While some media outlets supported Ibrahim's courageous stand for historical clarity, others amplified this critical voice, accusing him of intentionally provoking conflict. Within Burkina Faso, reactions ranged from disappointment to outrage. The older villagers, whose relatives had vanished into history, felt their stories being dismissed again. Younger generations, drawn by Ibrahim's calm determination, stood resolutely behind their president's decision throughout the growing controversy. Ibrahim remained quiet, watching closely but choosing not to immediately respond. He understood heated exchanges would solve nothing. Instead, he allowed his silence to carry its own message. Dignity was not negotiable, and neither was truth. Ibrahim's composure amid mounting international criticism deepened his people's respect and trust. They clearly saw he wasn't seeking conflict, but neither was he willing to hide uncomfortable truths for convenience. His silence was not weakness, it was strategic patience, firmly rooted in dignity. Amid rising criticism, President Ibrahim Traore chose neither anger nor confrontation. Instead, he quietly prepared a powerful, symbolic response. Without lengthy explanations or public rebuttals, he announced an international conference in Ouagadougou, inviting scholars, historians, and representatives from across Africa and beyond. The event was titled simply, Confronting Colonial Legacies, Truth and Dignity. It wasn't designed as a political battlefield. Instead, Ibrahim aimed to foster understanding, openness, and genuine dialogue. Delegates arrived from Mali, Senegal, Algeria, Congo, and even as far as Haiti, countries with their own scars from colonial rule, for many. This marked a first openly discussing histories often kept hidden, acknowledging the wounds still felt today during the conference. Ibrahim didn't dominate the discussions. He listened closely, allowing stories to unfold naturally. He knew healing came from acknowledging pain openly, not from assigning blame. This was about facing truths, restoring dignity, and reclaiming history together. On the final day, Ibrahim stood quietly before the gathered delegates. In measured tones, he offered a simple, powerful message. History isn't a weapon to harm anyone. It's a tool for understanding. We choose transparency, not out of anger, but out of respect for ourselves and our ancestors. His words resonated deeply. Delegates nodded in agreement, moved by the sincerity and dignity of Burkina Faso's young president. Ibrahim's calm determination sent a clear signal to critics around the world. His nation would not remain silent, but neither would it become bitter. They would confront their past courageously, respectfully, and without apology. The conference closed quietly, yet decisively. Ibrahim had not only answered criticism, he had transformed it into a platform for healing, respect, and unity. He had proven beyond words that actions truly speak louder, creating hope from a difficult truth. As Ibrahim's conference concluded, a remarkable new development emerged, shifting the narrative dramatically, quietly, without announcement. Ibrahim's team had worked alongside historians and researchers, uncovering long-forgotten documents buried deep within French archives. These were not speculations or rumors, they were original, carefully preserved records from the heart of colonial administration. The findings were profound and undeniable. Among the yellowed papers were detailed lists containing names of thousands of forced laborers, ordinary villagers from northern Burkina Faso, including Udalan. Each entry meticulously recorded their capture, transportation, and, tragically, their deaths. Handwritten notes in the margins indicated shockingly high mortality rates, evidence of the harsh realities endured in these forgotten camps. The discovery also revealed maps and detailed blueprints of multiple camps never previously acknowledged, suggesting Öcalan was only one piece in a much larger puzzle. Photographs emerged, faded and haunting, showing men, women, and even young children captured in moments of unimaginable hardship. The revelation stunned international observers. News outlets worldwide published these documents, prompting an intense wave of global reaction. Even the most skeptical voices fell silent, confronted with stark proof of a past deliberately hidden away. Across Burkina Faso, families saw their ancestors' names for the first time, names never before spoken aloud or recorded publicly. This wasn't just historical validation, it was the restoration of identity, dignity, and memory. Yet, Ibrahim himself chose to remain largely silent. He did not use these discoveries to provoke anger or resentment. Instead, he calmly released the evidence into the public domain, allowing history to speak for itself. His quiet strength and respectful approach won widespread admiration. Through his leadership, Ibrahim had transformed a potentially divisive moment into a powerful act of collective healing. By courageously confronting truth without bitterness, he showed his people and the world that true dignity comes from openness, honesty, and an unwavering commitment to justice. In the quiet aftermath of the archival revelations, an unexpected letter arrived at the Museum of Sand and Blood in Öcalan, sent from a small village in southern France. Its sender was an elderly man, now 94 years old. His name was Jean-Luc Bernard, a former soldier who had once served as a guard at the very camp recently uncovered by the storm. His letter was brief but deeply moving. In simple, handwritten words, Jean-Luc confessed openly to his role as a young soldier overseeing prisoners at Öcalan. He described in stark honesty the silent suffering he had witnessed decades before, conditions he could neither justify nor forget. "I have carried these memories my whole life," he wrote. "I saw these people lose their names, their lives. I stayed silent, believing that silence would erase my guilt. But silence only deepens wounds. I ask forgiveness not because I deserve it, but because those who died deserve to be remembered." Ibrahim carefully read the letter in private. Deeply moved by its sincerity and humility, he immediately made a powerful decision. The letter would become a permanent exhibit within the museum. Inscribed clearly on a wall facing the bones Jean-Luc had once guarded, visitors now paused silently before Jean-Luc's confession, profoundly affected by the honesty of a man confronting his past at life's end. The letter wasn't displayed to shame anyone. Rather, Ibrahim intended it as a reminder that dignity and courage can still flourish, even decades after silence and suffering. Jean-Luc's letter underscored Ibrahim's own belief that history must be faced openly, not to accuse, but to heal, through one man's brave act of conscience. Ibrahim had again shown the world the true strength of compassion and forgiveness. In the days following Jean-Luc Bernard's powerful letter, international attention intensified. Under mounting political pressure at home, the French government responded sharply, announcing a significant reduction in development aid to Burkina Faso. Officially, the decision cited diplomatic strain and rising tensions caused by Ibrahim's recent actions. Media headlines quickly painted this move as a punishment, an attempt to silence Ibrahim and discourage further revelations about the past. Within Burkina Faso, a sense of disappointment initially swept through communities already facing economic hardship. Yet, Ibrahim himself showed no sign of hesitation or anger. Instead, he chose a different path, calmly addressing the nation. He reminded his people that dignity and truth held greater value than short-term economic gain. He made clear that Burkina Faso would never trade silence for aid, with remarkable steadiness. Ibrahim traveled shortly after to Addis Ababa, speaking at the African Union Summit before an audience of African leaders and international diplomats. He delivered a brief yet powerful statement. "We appreciate friendship and cooperation, but not at the cost of silence. Our dignity is not negotiable." The summit hall resonated with respectful applause, the message deeply moving many delegates who themselves shared similar histories of struggle. Shortly thereafter, Ibrahim publicly announced new partnerships. Technical and humanitarian assistance would now come from countries like Cuba, Bolivia, and Venezuela, nations familiar with economic pressure and committed to solidarity. His calm strength amidst adversity inspired many across the continent. Ibrahim's decision demonstrated clearly to his people that dignity wasn't merely symbolic, it required courage and sacrifice. For ordinary citizens in Burkina Faso, Ibrahim's resilience became a powerful lesson. He had stood firm without anger or bitterness, choosing truth over convenience. In doing so, he reminded an entire nation of their own strength, dignity, and worth, following Ibrahim's bold stance at the African Union. A quiet transformation began within Burkina Faso. Rather than despair, the country rallied around a newfound sense of pride and solidarity. Communities came together, inspired by their leaders' calm courage in the face of adversity. Across the nation, schools started teaching openly about the camp discovered in Odalan. Young people visited the Museum of Sand and Blood, engaging deeply with history once hidden beneath layers of silence. The museum wasn't just a place of sadness, it had become a center of learning and resilience, helping a nation reclaim its story with dignity and honesty. President Ibrahim took further decisive steps. Instead of waiting passively for international aid, he initiated strategic partnerships with nations willing to support without conditions. Specialists from Cuba and Bolivia arrived to collaborate on projects involving agriculture, healthcare, and education. These new alliances symbolized a powerful shift, one built on mutual respect rather than dependency. In villages across Burkina Faso, a new spirit emerged. Communities rebuilt local infrastructure together, organized local educational workshops, and shared their stories openly, without fear or shame. Ibrahim's quiet strength had ignited pride and collective action, demonstrating clearly that true dignity arose from self-reliance and openness. At a public gathering in Ouagadougou, a young student stood to share his thoughts. Inspired by Ibrahim's leadership, the teenager confidently said, "Our president showed us we don't need to hide our past. We need to learn from it and grow stronger." The crowd responded warmly, reflecting the nation's growing confidence. Through Ibrahim's unwavering commitment to truth and dignity, a crisis had become a powerful opportunity. Burkina Faso emerged stronger, united not by bitterness, but by shared respect and genuine hope for the future. Months after the aid cuts, Burkina Faso stood remarkably resilient. Visitors continued to arrive at the Museum of Sand and Blood, now a powerful symbol of courage and dignity. Young people from across Africa traveled to Odalan, learning about the strength found not in anger, but in truth. Schools throughout the country incorporated the camp's story into their curriculum. Students spoke confidently about histories their parents once whispered. Teachers, inspired by Ibrahim's leadership, guided young minds towards openness and pride, not bitterness or resentment. In Ouagadougou, groups gathered regularly to discuss projects inspired by Ibrahim's calm defiance. Community centers flourished, local economies rebounded, and a renewed sense of pride spread from city streets to remote villages. President Ibrahim's quiet strength had become a national symbol. Citizens felt empowered not because of confrontation, but by embracing their history openly and proudly. The nation was no longer defined by silence or fear, but by dignity and courage. Burkina Faso stood taller than ever, united behind a leader who had shown them the true meaning of strength, standing firm, speaking honestly, and walking forward with dignity, no matter how strong the wind blew against them. At the Museum of Sand and Blood, life continued, vibrant and hopeful. Families, scholars, and students walked slowly through exhibits, quietly absorbing the powerful truth preserved beneath their feet. One afternoon, a mother visited with her young daughter. Together, they stood before Jean-Luc Bernard's humble letter, now permanently inscribed on the museum's wall. The child pointed at the careful handwriting and asked softly why someone would wait so long to speak. Her mother paused, gently explaining that sometimes people carried silence out of fear, shame, or uncertainty. But now, because someone dared to break that silence, others found strength to speak as well. The child nodded thoughtfully, absorbing a lesson more powerful than words alone could teach. Outside, sunlight illuminated the bones scattered beneath protective glass, once buried, forgotten beneath layers of sand and secrecy. These bones had finally found their voice. As visitors left, their quiet reflections carried a powerful, enduring message: truth cannot remain buried forever. Ibrahim Traore's courage had demonstrated this clearly, guiding his nation toward dignity, unity, and healing. Burkina Faso had chosen honesty over silence, dignity over bitterness. Ibrahim had not only revealed truths hidden beneath the sands, he had inspired an entire nation to rise confidently from the shadow of its past, stronger and wiser, moving forward together, with pride and resilience. Thank you all for watching this video. Please comment and let me know what you think about this story. Please like and subscribe to watch more great content on my channel. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more inspiring stories of personal growth and empowerment.